Nice.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Uncork Twitch channel with the Uncoder. Sorry that we were not here for you last week, but as a result, we have an extra special episode today, and it's extra special because I've got my friend and dear colleague Eric Ma to join me. Eric, why don't you say hello and introduce yourself?
Hey, Nick, thank you so much for having me. My name is Eric, and I'm a staff solutions engineer at Uncork, working on all sorts of fun stuff in Uncork for Uncorkers.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about new feature, continuing in our spring 2022 theme of the last few episodes. We talked about the marketplace and the great listings that came out there, and we saw an entire application built with marketplace snippets. So if you missed that one, try to find it on our channel or head over to YouTube where we post it when Twitch takes it down. Then we had Patrick Quinn on to talk about the great new grid system. So if you missed that, also check that. And today we're going to talk about the last of the major, not to say the only features in the 2020 release. It was still a big, wonderful release, but the last of the major things, which is called the enterprise view. Now, I think the timing for this is perfect. I missed last week's Twitch because I was doing some work travel. Yesterday, just traveled with our CEO to Des Moines, Iowa, to go meet with one of our enterprise clients. And actually ended up getting this awesome shirt. It says Des Moines, French for the Moines. And actually, Moines means monks. That's why I got these monks behind me. But the reason why I thought the whole French angle and seeing an enterprise client also made so much sense and was my theme for today is because if anybody doesn't know, the word entreprise, which is just like enterprise, in French means business. Right. So no surprise that we refer to big businesses as enterprises. You might be thinking in your head, I've also heard of this word entrepreneur, right? That is a business person, or a business owner. So tie-ins there. But that's not why we're really here. We're not talking, this isn't a French lesson. This is a lesson on all things amazing about no code, codeless, and Uncork. So why don't, Eric, you tell us a little bit more about the enterprise view itself and what you're going to show us today. What is it?
And since I'm a big nerd, despite us talking about the enterprise view today, I'm still holding it down for Star Wars since, it's May the 5th. So it's May the 5th be with you.
Yes. I like I was just telling you as we were getting ready for this, I'm also a Star Wars guy. So I appreciate that you didn't go Trekkie with the enterprise today. And it's
too easy. It's too easy.
Yeah, way too easy. Star Wars is so much more depth. Let's give a belated shout out to all our Jedis and Sith Lords out there.
Yeah. So Nick, you mentioned enterprise, right? And big business, and all those folks want to and need to have some sort of view of their applications, right? Their Uncork applications. And if I am someone who's trying to get a hold or a handle of what's going on with my apps and everyone that's working, we have a variety of different client sizes but they're varying team sizes. They'll have in-house teams, they'll have offshore teams, nearshore teams. And with all that stuff going on, sometimes it can be hard to understand, to get a bigger picture on what's going on, right? So we thought, hey, let's give an enterprise view, so to speak, which will give you a set of metrics and KPIs, key performance indicators, for those who have less handle over business speak. That gives you a quick look at what your applications are doing, what your development is looking like, and give you the ability to act, right? Since information and data is one thing, but it's only useful if you can act on it. If you can see something and then make a change or address or take a look and see as to, what's contributing to that issue.
Cool. Right? Yeah. And I think it's like, it's really important when, as with no code and low code tools, it's all about empowering, the word citizen developers thrown around a lot, or just other business users, bringing more people to the technology table and bringing the technology and business together. So it feels even more important, to have that oversight when you're starting to open up the development process to
Oh, sure.
more and more people in the organization or in the enterprise.
Yeah, totally. And I always find, as someone with a software engineering background, that it's important to have that democratization, right? I don't want to feel like folks are like on top of me, right? Uh, I don't want to feel claustrophobic as people are like, oh, so you want to make a change over there? Well, you got to ask me permission before you can, do some of that work.
Mm-hmm.
So this way, like I said, it allows folks to have that openness to allow folks to do their work, but then also be able to, I don't want to say spy, but to be able to see the results of that work without having to go through every single application, every single module, right, in
Yeah.
an Uncork application, and dig through service logs and everything like that, right? So the whole idea is that the Enterprise View dashboard will aggregate all of that information for you, um, every day. Um,
Cool. Yeah, and look, you said spy, and I know it was a good it was a good joke, but like it's transparency, right?
yeah,
And like I think, we search for transparency in so many aspects of our life. We love when the government is transparent with us. Like, wouldn't it be great if you can go to whitehouse.gov and see a dashboard of where they're spending all their
right.
money, where the
Yeah,
budget is going, right? And like
yeah,
how their elected officials are doing. Like, so we want that transparency in that kind of place. And you want the transparency in the business. I think, at many companies, people want transparency from the leadership. They want to know why we're
sure.
making decisions as a business, and they want to know, financials and things like that. And of course, you can't always give all that away, but it's great from the top down. But then it's really important from the bottom up too. Like you said, you don't have people hounding you, for this information when they can come to one place, and it's an open two-way dialogue between what's going
Right.
on and how we're doing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If I could get some insight, if I had a KPI dashboard for where my New York State tax return is right now, that would be awesome.
I did get a message from the New York website saying you have a message in your inbox. And I was like, I don't remember my password. Maybe I got my tax return. Maybe I didn't. It's probably just check my checking account.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was much anyway.
Yeah.
But like you said, if it's going to good things, I mean, charge me more taxes as long as you're using it well.
Exactly.
Cool. All right. So we talked about what it is, talked about why we built it, or why you all built it. I don't want to take any credit for this. But if I'm not mistaken, this is also built in Uncork, using Uncork,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
what was the decisioning there? Like why did we move forward building it with Uncork?
Sure. Well, I want to say it's like all the big reasons why any of our internal tools ends up getting built on Uncork, right? It's the big ones for me are ease of development, right, and speed to market. Uh, the enterprise dashboard is something, it's like a new concept for us, and instead of going through a prolonged process of prototyping and designing and going back and forth with prospective users and finding out what works, what doesn't, we're able to quickly come up with a final product that we can then iterate on, right?
Mhm.
It's sort of like, for me, back when I started the transition from waterfall development to agile development processes, it really integrates well with that kind of flow, right? Since you're almost doing what you would do in a prototyping phase, but for your actual product. Um, it's that it has that speed of development, um, and so along with that, right, it folds directly into that where you can now enter the prototype, deploy, get feedback, iterate, right? That whole process becomes rapid, becomes much quicker. Um, and so we'll be releasing the enterprise dashboard very soon. And then we already have feedback just from doing these kinds of demos where pretty quickly after release, we're going to iterate with the new version and have, new KPIs, all sorts of things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you said it so well there that Uncork, and it goes to a theme we try to reinforce, is like Uncork and no code, even in general, but particularly Uncork, we're not asking people to learn how to develop software in a new way entirely, right? Like all
Right.
the best practices, like agile practices, still exist, but made even better because those iterations can happen faster and in shorter. And then there's this whole thing now called the Uncork Agile Framework that many folks of our clients are using, which is kind of that Agile 2.0.
Right.
I said Agile framework, not enterprise framework. I feel like I'm saying enterprise a lot.
Like you said, Agile, yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, which is like, taking Agile and the best of it and applying it to Uncork to continue in the spirit of it. So, and I think one thing I was just thinking as you were talking about it, I love meta stuff, right? The whole UDLC was this meta Uncork with Uncork, but like as you were building the enterprise, you were able to see the enterprise dashboard for the enterprise dashboard.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. Reminding me to create my tests as I go, and also like see my error rate.
Mhm.
I don't want to give away too much until we get into
Yeah,
the demo, but
yeah.
yeah, all those KPIs and metrics were definitely useful as we're building it.
Cool. Well, hey, let's not worry about giving it away. Why don't we just
Yeah.
give it all away right now and jump into what I think everybody wants to see, which is the demo of what you built. And guess what, folks? Because it's built in Uncork here, Eric's going to walk through the front end, and then we're even going to show you some of how it was built. So this should be a
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. So what we're seeing here is the Uncork Enterprise Workspace view, and I have already pre-populated with a workspace. In this case, this is the workspace that all of our UDLC toolkit tools reside in. I've actually, this error rate, don't worry, Nick, it is not at 31%. I have artificially inflated it to read, a failing value.
Cool.
I just didn't want to make you too alarmed there.
Thank you. nor are many users who rely on the UDLC to help their development lifecycle in Uncork.
Yeah, exactly. But let me go through here. So like I said, this is the workspace. For those who aren't too familiar, right? A workspace in Uncork is a way for you to organize your applications together. So, and you can have any number of workspaces you would like. So here we have some metrics for this particular workspace. And here I can see they're labeled API test coverage, API success rate, test coverage and success rate for components, the error rate of this workspace, the config quality risk, the cyclomatic complexity, and number of releases. So besides the wonderful titles, we also have the actual metric, right? Coverage, rate, they were all in a percentage. So this would be for the number of APIs you have, what percentage of those APIs have tests, what percentage of your API tests are passing, and this is the number of your testable components that have test coverage, and then your number of testable components that are passing. And I say testable components because not all Uncork components or like the individual building blocks in an Uncork module are capable of having tests, right? These are things like decisions, data workflows, etc. Basically anything that would have some sort of forking output.
Right. So, like, of course, you can test everything in Uncork, but the ones that we've covered before about having automated tests run with very clear inputs and
Right.
outputs, logic and calculations, etc.
Exactly. And I want to say that our API test coverage is also not at 90%. This may have been me also making some nice, pretty data, since I don't think we've gone back and like retroactively added API tests after that feature was introduced, right? So we'll do that at some point. No big deal. Um, then we have error rate, right? And this is error rate for our workspace, for every application in this workspace. And this is the number of log entries that end up having a HTTP error code, right? Greater than or equal to 400, let's say. And then we have config quality risk. And this is something that we can talk a little bit about, since config quality is based on a set of best practice tests. Previous to this release, if you wanted to know your config quality, you would actually have to, one, order a config analysis test for your application or applications. Then you would wait a couple days as the wonderful data analytics team would do that for you. And then you would take a look at that spreadsheet as a result, and then possibly upload that spreadsheet into the UDLC Toolkit config analysis tool that gives you pretty charts and graphs. As part of this release, the data analytics team is now providing every single test result for every single one of our clients every day. So big difference, right? Every day you can just look, you don't have to order, you don't have to think ahead, you don't have to be like, all right, I want to release next week, so let's order a config analysis result. And like I mentioned really briefly, the config analysis tests are a set of best practices, right? Like, what are some good ones? I know, Nick, you helped define some of these.
I was actually just talking to our enterprise client in Des Moines yesterday about the config analysis and about how, today it's best practice focused, right? And then told them the exact story about how we got to what we have today, which was, this client was one of our first clients. We were a small startup, and when someone wanted a best practice review, they would enlist a solutions architect to come in and basically, pick through the application. And it resulted in us SAs creating a list of like, hey, we should look for all of these things. And then our head of analytics came over and he's like, why are you doing this manually? Like, we have all the configuration available. We can use AI and the understanding of the open standard, the codeless standard, to just do this for you. We're like, all right, amazing. So so that became the config analysis, and then we even got talking with them about what the future could be. Like today it's best practices. I mean, think of tomorrow where you can encourage better architectural things, or we just released the new grids, right? We talked about the other week. Well, some people have old grids, and maybe they don't know which is the right grid for them. How should they upgrade to a grid? Can they upgrade to a grid? Which grid to do it? I mean, so maybe config analysis, the next version, recommends other architectures, recommends other components for you. Like there's so much to build on with that.
Yeah, no, totally.
Sorry.
Yeah. Right. So someone looking at this level probably doesn't want to know, okay, we have 5 failing config analysis tests of this type. We have a bunch of buttons that don't go to anywhere. All right. Like they don't want to know that. They want to know, how risky is it for me to release this application right now? Right. How well is everyone working within this workspace sticking to best practices? Right. And so that's what the config quality risk tells us. In this case, it's looking at like every single one of those config analysis tests will have some sort of severity rating. And so this is a summation and then a max of low, moderate, or high risk at the workspace level, right? So if there's any application in this workspace that has high risk, this workspace is going to be at high risk. But at the other, we'll be able to drill down as well. And at those levels, the config quality risk at that point is, a collection of the scores, right? That takes us also into another fairly complex metric, which is cyclomatic complexity, right? And not pun. I didn't mean to use complexity in the complexity definition, but right. So for those who don't know, cyclomatic complexity is a measure of divergent paths within application logic, right? And some very smart folks at Uncork have gone through and figured out what types of behaviors, what types of design within Uncork relates to complexity within the context of cyclomatic complexity, right? If you have a decision that has independent paths, if you have data workflows with branching outputs, they've done all that and allow us to be able to hit an endpoint and retrieve that complexity for every piece within your applications. And so this allows us to tell you, hey, your cyclomatic complexity, it's a 10. But what does that 10 mean? That's up to you. The normal reaction to a high cyclomatic complexity would be to modularize, right? At the workspace level, you're not so much looking at modularizing your application, but just looking to see, how bad are we getting? How complex is this workspace getting? And do we have to think about simplifying things, right? Because that's going to ease your even within Uncork, with its ease of development, stuff can get complicated. It's not just intake forms. There are some very complex applications out there built in Uncork, and so this gives you an eye towards maintainability and stability, right? And then we have the boring one: releases. How often are we releasing, right? And if you'll notice, the other thing here, all but releases have a green circle with a check or a red circle with an X, and that's whether we're passing or failing, right? We're not passing judgment on your number of releases. There's no passing there or failing, but there's that. And then the last item in each KPI is a delta, right, or a change since yesterday. So that will give you, just the metric by itself is one thing, but knowing your trend, like, okay, cool, we're at 90%. And we shot up almost 25% yesterday. Great. And we can see here that, my error rate is up 1%. Not too alarming beyond the fact that we're failing, but it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
And it might seem redundant that we say the last one day for each of these, but that's we built this a little robust so that we can look at some feature functionality that we can tease and talk about later.
Cool. Just to on that, so like one with the releases, it actually, right, you don't know if it's good or bad, right? I
Right.
think it could be. It's an interesting thing. Like, are more releases good or more releases bad?
Right.
We were just talking about how Uncork enables rapid iterations faster than ever. So maybe a high number of releases is a really good thing.
Yeah, it could be.
And you're releasing every day and giving new functionality to your users.
But then conversely, like if I know operationally that I've arranged with my team that I will promote to user acceptance testing environment, right? UAT environment or QA. And I do that maybe once a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see that there were 30 releases yesterday.
Yeah.
I have some talking to do. Someone's got some explaining to do.
Right.
To figure out what happened, right?
That's actually, it's something interesting to consider for, we'll talk at the end about what's coming up in the future, but maybe there is something there, like some kind of average where you can set, and maybe it's people promoting who shouldn't, maybe it's a lot of bugs and you have to keep patching them,
Right.
Who knows?
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of exciting things that people want to add, either as hooks into this or as alerts and things like that. So,
cool. And one other thing, because we have a bunch of comments, which is awesome to see. Keep chatting, folks. We are looking at it. But one says, imagine this would be helpful for non-technical users too. And I think we kind of talked about it early on, but I just love that it was brought back up because you explain this. I think a lot of technical people are like, yeah, all these make sense. but other people may not. And as you're showing me these trend lines, or the up or down and the colors, like, it's almost, you don't need to be technical to know
Right. Yeah.
if you're doing a good job or not,
Yeah.
right?
It's our
Like,
primary.
yeah, sorry.
I would say, yeah, that's the primary goal here, right? Is that this is useful for non-technical folks, but still useful for those of us who are technical.
Right. Yeah. Like, the technical person is going to look at it and say, all right, we have a high risk app. We have a 31% error rate. That's bad. They're going to drill into the errors. They're going to talk to the people about how to solve it. But you may still have the business user just walk in and be like, oh, we're all green. That's great. Or, oh, we're red. Like, I don't know what to do with the red, but I know someone has to do something
Right.
with the red, and I can still go find the right person to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then the related to that, as far as non-technical folks, we try and break down the cyclomatic complexity KPI here with this handy dandy chart, which I also want to say, I didn't build this entire thing, right? Lots of team members helped build this. This chart was implemented by Hamilton, who I believe was on a previous stream.
Yeah.
So shout out to Hamilton. And this is great. What it's showing us as a scatter plot is the total app complexity compared to the average complexity per application and module, right? So if here I can see at a glance that there are some outliers here, right? Submission revisions, which kind of makes sense, since that's looking at all these different submissions and looking at different versions of them, comparing different pieces of data. Here you've got service logs. Again, that one's digging through all of your service logs, tons of different filtering options and searching. Module revisions, same idea. Dependencies, right? Looks at kind of recursively at every single one of your modules and sees which other modules it talks to, right? So that makes sense that it would be fairly complex. So, and this is probably where, like, this grouping here is in the bottom left. That's probably where you would like to be as an overall health for cyclomatic complexity. And so we're looking pretty good, right? We got some few outliers. I can explain away some of this complexity, and it's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this will do a pretty good job at helping folks interpret like this score here.
Right.
I think that's really great. And then we have at the very bottom here a list of our applications, right, that are in this workspace. And so now I can dig in. It's like, oh, you know what, config search. Let's take a look. And so now it's pulling up the application view. It's loading in our metrics. And one thing, I don't know if you realized, it may not seem super fast, but that was collecting all these metrics, all this data, compiled against the entire this entire application in a handful of seconds, right? So, and we'll touch on this later, but there is a somewhat complex set of automated workflows that are running every day to collect that data. So I just wanted to touch on that, since like 2 seconds or a second seems like an eternity on a live stream, but
yeah,
it's actually ends up being pretty quick. So here you can see the same basic metrics arranged in a different order that maybe make more sense for an application view. And here you can see we have a variety of passing and failing. I think these are failing because I was doing some testing and set my pass rates too high, over 100%.
You're on a tight.
I want 105%.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead. So here you can see, let me just go back here. I clicked on set success thresholds. And when you do this, this allows you, like earlier, I kind of glossed over they're passing or failing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's because I want to talk about this here, where you get to define what passing and failing looks like for you, right? Each environment will have defaults out of the box, but then you can go in and change them. And when you set those thresholds, you're going to be setting them at each level, right? At the workspace level, at the application level, and the module level. So you can see the metrics updated right away here. We're still failing on error rate. Like, how generous do I want to feel like being? Okay, maybe I looked at those errors and they're okay, not great, but maybe we're throwing errors as part of our normal process.
Mhm.
So 20% is fine after I took a look. But how did I make that decision, right? How did I decide 20% is okay? One of the things I mentioned earlier was that these KPIs should be actionable, right? And we talked a little bit about that where, all right, 20% error rate, but what does that mean? Like what is causing these errors? Um, if I click on error rate, that opens up, coincidentally enough, another UDLC tool, service logs dashboard. And not only does it do that, but it is pre-populating our filters with the date range and then with the correct response codes we want. So now if I click apply filters, it's going to go ahead and just show me uh, the errors between 5.4 and 5.5. And so now I can say, all right, cool. There's a total of 8. Like these 8 equates to that 20%, right? How bad are these, right? I can go in and view, take a look. Um, I know that these errors are because I know what Russell's working on.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense that Russell's working on some complicated stuff right now. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'm fine with that. I'm going to go ahead and say that 20% is okay. It's where we're at.
Mhm.
And I can set that threshold. Um, and yeah, I mean, we have the same thing here, cyclomatic complexity, and then a list of the modules within its application, and then we can drill down one more level. Um, and let's go ahead and do that. Oh, and I actually clicked on the wrong one. This is going to be, yep, live demos.
Nobody saw that.
Nobody saw that. I was playing with that one earlier, trying to force bad errors and things. Here we go. Request. This one should have not Eric ruined data. There we go. So
No risk. I didn't even think that was an option. Look at that.
what's that?
It says no risk. I thought low risk was the
Oh
best.
yeah, no risk. That means
No risk.
you have no config analysis test results.
Nothing can possibly go wrong.
You have perfect score. And maybe not a perfect score. However, um, a, a coming feature for config analysis is being able to say, hey, these tests, I don't care about them, right? They may be best practices, but they're either false positives or maybe they're not applicable to what I'm trying to do, right? A best practice is not like set in stone, right?
Yeah.
So you can say, you know what, these I'm not going to do anything about, and then the enterprise dashboard will ignore those. So that's another way you can get no risk. This is not super rare, just this may be a little rare.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now we're seeing at a module view, right? So I can see that even though the application, the workspace has like 600 some odd releases, this particular module, config search request, has only been released 33 times, right? So that tells me some information there, how often we're releasing our entire workspace, etc. Same thing, we can compare this to the application level and see how often the entire application is being promoted versus like individually or piecemeal. But yeah, so that's the pretty much the front end for Enterprise View Dashboard. I know I also mentioned that there's some back-end stuff going on. Did you want to talk about that?
I do want to jump into it, but we got the last comment we definitely want to address here. It's a really, it can open up some good conversation. So the comment says, and thank you for posting it. I would be scared to show this to my client. Any red is a problem for non-technical users. So I certainly have my opinions on it, but you're the guest today, Eric. So I'm going to toss that to you. And how would you respond to this user on that concept? Because I get it, I get where they're coming from. But what would you say to them?
Sure. I think that is good, right? I want my client to be engaged and involved with, and I can say this having been client facing.
And some
So I'm
very
not,
challenging clients,
yeah,
very high profile
right.
challenging clients
So I'm
like
not
that.
throwing anyone under the bus here. It's just like I know for me personally, I want my client to be engaged and involved, right? I want them to say, "Hey, Eric, I see this red on error rate. Like, why are our errors going up?"
Hmm.
One, because that means I know that they're looking and asking questions, right? I never want my client to be like we talked about transparency earlier before, right? Um, and that's the whole idea of this is that I don't want my client to be surprised, right? By when something bad does go wrong. If they're taking an active role in development, I think that's fantastic. Um, it may in early on involve more flares going up and flags being raised,
Hmm.
maybe an extra call or two. Um, but I think it's good. And not only that, it keeps me honest, right? Like if I'm looking at API test coverage and I'm promising that we're going to have full test coverage by the end of a deployment, um, it's great for the client to be able to see that. And I know that the trend is red, but you can get rid of these red X's by by setting your pass thresholds
Yeah.
pretty generously.
Right.
And not only that, like once you set them, they don't have to be set that way, right? As time goes on, you can be like, you know what? Early on in development, let's set these really generous, right? API test coverage, um, you know, 10%, right? I
Yep.
don't expect everyone to add tests the first thing they do in an Uncork application situation, right? Application development situation. Um, it's or maybe someone wants to do test driven development. Sure, go ahead. Go ahead and if your team is doing that, go ahead set the super high when you start out, right?
Yeah.
It all depends on you. Like these metrics are what you want them to be for you.
Yeah, I think that's like a really important thing. I think it's what's like you say, what stage in development you are. Maybe as you said, early in development, the thresholds are very low. As you get closer to production or when you're in production, those thresholds go up. As your application grows and you have more and more users and more volume on, then maybe you increase them even more because the impact of any problem is going to, have a broader reach. So, and also it's like what applications are we building? I mean, on Cork, you can build anything, right? It could be, a consumer facing website or a customer facing website, client facing website that is going to, if something goes wrong, like that's bad. And for that, you
Right,
want high thresholds. It could be some internal team that some tool just needed to like automate an internal process or digitize an internal process. And if something goes wrong there, lower impact, so lower threshold. So to me, it's about having that conversation, with the client to understand, this is why we're setting it based on everything you said, everything, I kind of added in. And then,
yeah,
you get to that number where, sure, you may get red, but there's a mutual understanding around what that red means.
right. And then also, um, right, what we're looking at here, this is my staging environment, right? And I can entirely see your staging environment having a completely different set of thresholds compared to
Yeah.
your UAT environment.
Yeah.
And so maybe if your client is maybe a little too hands-on, you're like, hey, you know what? And I don't think there's such a thing. You can work with any sort of amount of engagement, but so hey, use the UAT environment dashboard as a gauge, right, for how we're
Mhm.
doing, because that's after staging is sloppy, staging is messy. It's where everyone's working. There's stuff that's not done, so you're going to have tons of errors, right?
Mhm.
Um, So you can tell your client, hey, you know what? Look at the UAT dashboard. Or even, hey, you know what? Look at pre-prod if you have a pre-prod environment.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that you can navigate. Or don't tell them about this.
Yeah, right. There's
If it's
that.
that bad.
But and I think of another, and I'm kind of forcing the analogy a little bit, but I had an experience with an Airbnb host a long time ago where I noticed there wasn't a smoke alarm in the apartment. So I contacted the Airbnb host, and she responded to me, "Well, we don't need a smoke alarm because we've never had a fire." And I was like, that is so backwards. Like, that's not a reason to not have a smoke alarm. And it's like, it kind of applies here. Like, of course, most of the time your smoke alarm is sitting there and it's just flashing a nice little green light telling you my battery's on and everything's okay, right? But if there's a problem, it's going to start blaring red and very loudly alerting you to an issue that's going on in your environment. And like, sure, you don't want that blaring loud noise and you don't want there to be a fire in your house, but you do want to know to get out. You do want to know to collect your loved ones and your children and your pets and things like that. So I personally would say, yeah, like I'd rather know about it and then let's fix it than all of a sudden one day your application comes crashing down or burning down because you weren't alerted to these things or aware of these things earlier.
Right. And the last thing I want to say about this is if we get enough feedback that folks don't want the red and the green on the deltas, we'll take it away.
Sure. It could be a setting.
Make it configurable.
Yep. You have a checkbox that says, highlight thresholds or something.
Right. And, and it's okay if we do that. Like part of this is we have multiple indicators, right? Partially for accessibility, right? There's you get a plus or a minus, there's an up and a down arrow, as well as the color, right? So we're not relying on any one. And same thing with the pass and fail icons, right? We could lose the color and it's still intelligible, right? You got a check mark or an X. Probably we should probably also add the words pass or fail somewhere. But yeah. So that's all that, and that's a great question, and you can see by how long we talked about it.
Yeah, I love talking to Eric about it. It's some good conversation. I hope folks liked hearing us riff on that. Great question, and thank you everybody for being so active today. I know it's an exciting feature. So that said, I know you said you wanted to dig into some back end stuff and show us a little bit about how and what's cool too, this is UDLC. So once this gets into your environment, everybody, you can go look at this. You can go, it's open source config, right? You can go see the config, you can fork the config, for our user who doesn't want to show the clients, they don't even need to submit a request to disable the threshold. Just go fork it into your own enterprise view and disable that feature.
Yeah. You can delete the modules if you want.
Delete it, but we encourage you to keep it on for all the aforementioned reasons.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mentioned that collecting all this data in real time would be slow. There's a lot of information, right? Just our staging environment has, I want to say, hundreds of applications, right? And thousands of module metrics. And we're not that big, right, of an environment. There are definitely clients who have thousands of applications. Yeah, that's a lot of data. So there was a couple things we took a look at while designing this. And one of the things we wanted to take into account was we're storing this data in a client environment, but we don't want to blow up their storage, right? They're using that, especially like, in their staging and UAT environments, right? Which would normally have not that large of a storage requirement as far as amount of information and data being stored in submissions and things. And because these are Uncork applications, all of our data is stored in submissions. So how do we do that, right? Especially since we're running this every day. Um, that would mean like if I have 2,000 module metrics, that would be 2,000 submissions a day combined with times however many days that we're running. This has been running for. Uh, so that's one thing we wanted to keep in mind, and the other one was right performance. So if I were to click on UDSC Toolkit here on the workspace, uh, I don't want to sit there waiting for minutes, right? I want to be able to see this now. That's the whole. No one's going to use it if they have to sit here and wait. Put in a request to come back later. So we wanted to be able to aggregate all that data ahead of time, all those metrics, for all of your workspaces, all of your applications, all of your modules. So we have I think what it's a fun kind of almost novel approach to how we're doing this. So one, to address the speed issue, is we're collecting all this data for you on a nightly basis, right? In the hopefully in some non-working hours for you. And because this is an Uncork application, you can go and modify that schedule if you'd like to make it more amenable to your particular team's work schedule. But right now, like it happens, like in the wee hours of Eastern Standard Time, uh, and collects all that information, right? Runs all the processes, gets the data from all the various locations, and stores it. But what we've done to address the first concern I mentioned, which is storage capacity and storage usage, is we're doing an upsert, right? So we're saying, hey, does a submission exist for API test coverage for this workspace? If so, we'll just go ahead and update that submission, right? So that's cool, but what about the trending data, right? I have yesterday's data in addition to today. Well, something that Uncork does for free for us, free as in effort, right? I don't know about the money. I don't talk about money, but free as an effort is submission revisions, right? If a submission gets updated, it automatically has an archive of it built into the platform, and it's a cost, like a, let's call it a database query cost free archive, right? And part of the beauty about working in Uncork is I don't have to care about the technology that's backing it, right? I know that this submission, this 90%, is saved in our Mongo database, and I know that this submission revision is being stored in Amazon S3. It's a little slower, not slow enough to impact what we're doing because we're collecting all this data ahead of time, right? And so that we're able to store all this information for you without affecting the performance of your Mongo data collection, your Mongo document collection. And so that I thought was pretty neat and fun. And because we never have to worry about the storing of those revisions, if enough people ask, we can add some more filters to our front end. Like say, if you wanted to look at your metrics for the past week, maybe folks want to see charts and graphs of trending over time. That's something that we can do by leveraging the power of Uncork's built-in submission revisions.
Yeah.
So that was something that was pretty neat that that ended up being useful for this application.
Yeah, I actually kind of I forgot that that's what powered so much of this until you started and I lit up because one for folks just thinking about this beyond enterprise, right? Like the point that Eric said to really key on is for free, Uncork is storing every single change you make to data or your clients make to data and their clients make to data. Everything, every time a submission is saved and the data is saved, it is versioned. And then you showed us that the cyclomatic complexity for the submission revisions tool is a little off on the high end, but I don't think that was a tool we talked about when we did the broader UDLC series. But that's a tool where you can actually view differences between any two submissions that have ever been, or any two submissions, or any two versions of a single submission.
Right.
And when you think about some of the highly regulated industries that Uncork is being used to build applications for, that's important to know the life cycle of an insurance policy, the life cycle of an investment account, but it applies for everything down to the data of what you're building in Uncork and so much more.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why I call this kind of like a novel approach is that I often see submission revisions used as sort of a support tool, or like, hey, something happened to this policy. I'm not sure who did it or what process did it. Maybe someone's troubleshooting in their application, and as they're developing it, and they're trying to figure out, oh, I've got like 6 different modules making changes, who did what when, and they'll go through the submission revisions to figure that out. But I don't know if too many folks who are using the revisions like as part of their application.
Right.
So this is kind of a neat way. And maybe it'll have folks, after, if they take a look at the config, maybe they'll go ahead and start implementing this kind of solution themselves. And that's kind of the other kind of fun, rewarding part about working on these UDLC toolkit tools is finding new ways to do things and sharing them with the community who is adventurous enough to take a look and see what these tools are doing.
Yep, that's awesome. So
awesome. But yeah, the other part of this back end information is, or is it config quality risk, right? So that data, I talked briefly about, and I'll just mention this real quick, how the data analytics team is running this process, right? They're running all these tests for every client every day. And so they are providing that's being provided to the enterprise dashboard, back end as a whole. And then every single client environment is asking, hey, UDLC toolkit, please give me my test results every day. And then we have the same process where we're upserting those test results. So they're used on each individual client environment. And so we'll have that history of test results as well, not only for the enterprise dashboard, but also the next version of the config analysis tool. So right now, you kind of just have each individual config analysis report sitting there all by itself as an island. But in the future, you'll be able to say, how are we getting better, right? are we actually improving at following our best practices, or is it just each time we take a look, we go ahead and hit things, and then no one's learning from the lessons, right? So hopefully that will be useful too, right? And like I said, we'll have that historical data. Well, not we. All of our clients will have their historical data.
Cool. All right. So you just teased a little bit about what else is coming, both when you're talking about the upgrade to config analysis, and you mentioned some stuff earlier as well. But like, I'd love for you to just kind of take us home with, obviously, I hope everyone realizes how awesome this is, and also, the cool stuff that I hope everyone digs into the config if you're an Uncork user and you get it in your environment soon. But why don't you take us home with painting a picture or teasing a little bit about what the future would hold for the enterprise?
Oh, sure. Literally yesterday, right? And I hate overusing the word literally, but in this case, it was literally yesterday. One of our,
with a British accent, literally.
Yeah, literally yesterday. I won't injure everyone with my accents. But yeah, I demonstrated this for some of our internal folks, um, and one of our senior solutions architects was like, "Hey, uh, could I have a metric that's like a heartbeat for my applications, like as industry standard heartbeat? So if I'm looking at the health of my workspace or my apps, I could say create an API that registers my application with the enterprise dashboard and just says, say every minute or whatever we end up deciding is a healthy amount, just says, I'm here and I'm running, right? Uh, I think that's a fantastic idea, and a really great indicator of health, right? Of development health. Because if someone has broken somehow, one of your processes that runs on a cyclic basis or on a scheduled basis, it'd be good to know that before you push to UAT, before you push to production. And it's not always, and it's not always clear. If you have a very complex application, if that's going to happen, right? And then so that was an idea for a new KPI. Another thing is, okay, cool, I can look at individual workspaces, but what if I want an even bigger overview, right? A larger overview of everything in my environment, right? Not just a workspace at a time. And maybe I want to see hot button items, maybe the biggest deltas, right? We can make that configurable, maybe, where you could say, hey, I want to know if there's any changes over 25%, right? Or if I go from low to high or no to moderate risk, set those types of thresholds, and that you can have a very nice dashboard, right? Like a lot of people know Datadog, right? I love Datadog, but so much information. It's great to be able to create your own dashboard, right? So that's the kind of thing that we would be leaning towards. And the other thing, triggering off of those types of dashboards is, can I get alerted, right, to these kinds of changes? And one, can I get emailed, and two, get emailed a summary, right? That's one of the, oftentimes the folks who want to see this dashboard are often the people who don't have time to look at this dashboard. So yeah, like just getting a weekly email or a monthly email, or a configurable amount of time to get a nice little snapshot as to what it looks like, or even on demand, right? Since we talked about the fact that we have data going back forever, can I just click a button and say, hey, I want to see this report for the last month, or the last, give me a digest of the past year. I think would be really, really fun things and useful things to add. It's not just about my fun, right?
Right.
But yeah, but doing this work is great and fun.
All right, cool. Would you ever see a world where, so like, all right, I could see that things are bad, right? So I have low test coverage, I have high error rates, I have high risk, and I have really high complexity. But I'm like, meh, whatever, and I go promote anyway. Do
Sure.
you see a world where maybe like I couldn't do that?
Oh yeah, sure. Maybe I subliminally told myself to not talk about that one, since that one actually fights against the, like the what I believe in is that the democratization of development and things.
Right.
But yeah, no, it's an off requested feature for the enterprise dashboard to integrate with some of our other tools, right? And so in this case, release management. So release management is our tool that was it L talked about, right, on the stream, and right, right, that's the tool that folks use to move their applications, to promote your applications to the next environment. Right now, the only sort of gatekeeping we have there is if it asks, is like, hey, did you run your config analysis tests? And you can answer yes or no.
Yeah.
It doesn't, there's no action. It's not keeping track. Don't tell anyone it doesn't keep track. It just is there to remind you.
The entire Twitch verse.
Oh no.
Yep.
But yeah,
Cat's out of the bag.
right. It's there to, as a subtle reminder, like, hey,
Yeah.
you should probably do this. It's a best practice. It's a
Right.
best practice to check the best practices.
Yeah.
But folks definitely want to be able to add different abilities, different thresholds to being able to click on promote, right? Um, and so maybe it's, hey, your error rate is like 40%. Maybe you shouldn't promote this.
Yeah.
Um, and same thing for any of these. So that's definitely something that we're looking at as to and I talked with you last week or something about making that really modular, right? And maybe not making it like hard coded, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, these are the two things that you could gate promotion with, but maybe it's more like you can define your own, right? Define your own rules. I don't want to say it's like a rules engine, since I haven't used a good one. um, that kind of idea, right? Where you can define for yourself, for your environment, what bars promotion, right? And what lets you through.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you made a few great points there. One is like, maybe you don't want to prevent people. Maybe you want to democratize and have more folks doing it. And maybe, I've even had conversations with some folks and even on our DevOps team here about promoting more is better, even if things aren't great, because you reduce the time between two potentially, complex
Right.
ones.
It's easier to
So
fix a smaller thing.
exactly, right? So but I think what you've kind of said a few times throughout this is you're building this to be extremely flexible with how
Right.
people want to use it, right? So if somebody doesn't want to show their client red X's, set high thresholds. If somebody doesn't want to block, various activities from it, don't block various activities from it. So it's going to be very configurable in terms of how it's going to best fit into your SDLC and the nature of the products that you're building.
Yeah, exactly. And oftentimes, like it's one of those fine lines that you mentioned, that the flexibility we're building in. Uh, when you're developing software, right? Over engineering, trying to be too flexible, right? But I find that when we're developing it on Cork, we can afford it. We can afford to do a little bit of extra work there, because it's less work
Right.
than we would otherwise be doing.
That's like a value that we've never heard kind of
We can slide
described
that.
so nicely.
We can shift over that line, right? That we're always trying to figure out, right? As software developers and architects and what have you, as to how much is too enough? Is
Yeah.
too much, right? And how much is enough? And
Right.
I'm not going to say we get it right all the time while
Yeah.
developing an Uncork, but it's something that we could definitely push a little on.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but also be mindful of, right, when
Sure.
designing and architecting.
Right. And in the end, I just thought of like scope creep as you're talking about it. So it's almost like, hey, you can deal with more scope creep because you're never going to go away from scope creep. You're always going to have people pushing you
Right.
to creep,
Yeah,
and you got to
exactly.
handle more of it when you're building in Uncork or
Yeah. But let's well, to go a little bit into the enterprise metaphor or simile with Star Trek. Uh, there's a concept of Scotty time or Scotty time or Geordie time, right? The two famous Starfleet engineers on the
Mhm.
Starship Enterprise, right? Scotty time. Geordie always tells him how long it's going to take. Scotty, I was seeing the comments.
Yeah.
Scotty time. He's like, I can't remember the exact quote. It's a great episode of TNG, but Scotty's like, how long is it going to take? 3 hours. You told him 3 hours. Like, no, you're supposed to tell him 9 hours.
Yeah.
And then when it gets done in 3, you're a miracle worker.
Yep.
So that's the Scotty time, Geordie time that one of my bosses would always ask me. Like, Eric, is all right. That estimate, is it Scotty time or Geordie time? So exactly 9 hours, Captain. So as folks doing the implementation and design, you still want to build in some Scotty time, but
Yeah.
we can deliver more than you can
That's
anyway.
right.
That was
And
my
hey,
clumsy
sorry.
analogy.
Yeah, no, you know what? I was going to use that as a perfect segue to wrap it up and say, I think that you delivered in this Twitch more than promised. So thank you so much for coming on, showing us the front end, showing us the back end, even highlighting some features that I don't even think we were going to highlight in this Twitch episode. And also just, and some great banter around, software development, good practices. Thank you to everybody who's watching and engaging. Eric, anything you want to say to your whole new fan base before we go?
No, I mean, thanks for having me, Nick. It was fun. This is the most time I spent on Twitch without playing a game. So I'll go back to playing my Rocket League or what else am I streaming nowadays? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't dare stream myself playing Rocket League. I love it, but I am not very good.
I was good when it came out. I'm no longer good.
Yeah. Now all the 7-year-olds have become 12 and they're really good now. They figured out their
yeah. I'll stick to streaming Civilization or whatever.
Oh, dude, I will watch you play Civ. We should do I've never done a game with anybody like online.
Well, we can play
until we retire to finish, but
AoE 4. I'm playing Age of Empires 4.
Oh, okay. Well,
that's
either way, we'll have to pick this conversation up offline because I think we're going to let folks go. Thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Eric. Thank you,
Thank you so much, everyone.
And we'll see you back. You're back on this normal schedule going forward. We'll see you next week. Until then, take care and happy no coding. I guess trying a new tagline.